You just did the math again. Not with a calculator. In your head. At a red light, or in the middle of a meeting, or right before you fell asleep last night. You ran the numbers, your age, your savings, your job, and the answer came back the same way it always does. Not yet. Maybe in 10 years. Maybe 15. Maybe when the kids are older, or the car is paid off, or the market finally does what it's supposed to do. You've been saying, not yet, for so long it doesn't even sound like a sentence anymore. It sounds like a fact. Like gravity. Like something that simply is. But what if that feeling, that resigned, tired, this is just how it is, feeling, what if that feeling is the trap itself? My name is Semzi. And before we go any further, I need you to understand something about what I do. I don't give you investment tips. I don't tell you to cut your coffee or follow a budget template. What I do is take the financial lies you've been told your entire life, hold them up to the light, and show you exactly how they've been costing you years. Not dollars. Years of your life. And today, that's exactly what we're about to do. If this channel is new to you, subscribe right now, not because of habit, but because what you're about to hear is the kind of thing people pay thousands of dollars in financial seminars to learn, and they still leave with half the picture. Hit like if you're already feeling something. And in the comments, I want you to tell me one word. What does early retirement mean to you? One word. We'll come back to that. Here's what this video is actually about. It's about why retiring early is not a rich person's game. It's not a hustle culture fantasy. It's not about becoming a millionaire by 30. It's about a specific set of decisions, most of them invisible, almost none of them about income, that determine whether you spend your best years working for someone else or living for yourself. By the time this video ends, you're going to understand why some people retire at 42 and others retire at 72, and why the difference between those two people is almost never what you think it is. Stay with me, because the part that will change how you think about money completely doesn't come until the middle of this video, and if you leave before that, you'll carry the same story about retirement for the rest of your life. Let's start with where you actually are. You have a job. Maybe a decent one. Maybe even a good one by most people's standards. You get paid, you pay your bills, you cover the basics, and at the end of the month there's a little left over, sometimes. Enough to feel okay. Not enough to feel free. And that gap, that distance between okay and free, has become so normal that you've stopped measuring it. You've started calling it, just life. But let's be specific, because this is where most money conversations fail you. They stay vague. Vague is comfortable. Vague lets you nod along without changing anything. So here is your life in specific terms. 3 years ago, you told yourself you'd start seriously saving. Not just the small amount that goes into your 401k automatically, seriously saving. Building something real. You didn't. You meant to. But there was the car issue that year, and then the move, and then one thing quietly became another, and now it's 3 years later and the savings account looks almost identical to what it looked like when you made that promise to yourself. Not because you're irresponsible. Because life is expensive and nobody ever taught you how to make the math work when everything costs more than it used to. You have subscriptions you're not using. Not one or two. Research from the financial consultancy firm West Monroe found that Americans underestimate their monthly subscription spending by nearly 100%. You think you're spending around $86 a month. You're probably spending closer to $219. That's not a catastrophe on its own. But that's over $130 a month you didn't realize was leaving. Over a year, that's over $1,500. Over 5 years, assuming even modest investment returns, that's closer to $10,000. Gone. Not spent on something meaningful. Just gone, quietly, in the background, while you were busy surviving. And there's the lifestyle creep. The thing nobody warns you about because it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels like progress. You got a raise and your rent went up. You started earning more and somehow started feeling more broke. Harvard Business School researchers have studied this phenomenon extensively, the way that increases in income trigger almost automatic increases in spending, so that the gap between what you earn and what you keep stays stubbornly, mysteriously small. You weren't reckless. The pattern was reckless. And you were inside it without a map. Then there's the retirement calculator. You've opened it. Maybe more than once. You put in your age, your current savings, your expected salary. And then you see the number you'd need to retire comfortably, and something in your chest does a quiet thing. A sinking. A recalibration. Because the number is enormous. It's 700,000, or 1,000,000, or 1.5 million, and the distance between where you are and where that number lives feels like the distance between two different planets. So you close the tab. Because opening it felt responsible, but staying with it felt punishing. And somewhere underneath all of this, underneath the subscriptions and the savings and the calculators, there is a quieter, heavier thing. A question you don't say out loud. It sounds like this: is this it? Is this just how the rest of it goes? Work until 65, retire if the money holds out, and hope the health holds out too? That question is the most important thing in this video. Because the answer is no. But not in the motivational poster way. In a very specific, research-backed, biologically and psychologically real way that we are about to get into. First, I need to show you the traps. Because they are not your fault. And that matters, not so you can feel better, but so you can see them clearly. The first trap is what behavioral economists at Princeton University have identified as present bias. Your brain, specifically a region called the limbic system, which handles emotion and immediate reward, is biologically louder than the prefrontal cortex, which handles long-term planning. In plain terms, the part of your brain that wants the upgrade, the dinner out, the slightly nicer apartment, is simply louder and faster than the part that wants you to be financially free at 45. This is not a character flaw. It is a neurological reality that the entire consumer economy has been engineered to exploit. Every advertisement you see is designed to activate your limbic system before your prefrontal cortex can run the numbers. They have billion-dollar budgets for this. You have willpower. The fight was never fair. The second trap is a story. The story that retirement is something that happens to you at the end of a career. The story that early retirement is for the wealthy, the lucky, the people who got in on the right investment at the right time. This story was not accidental. A study published by the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that the concept of the traditional 65 retirement age was essentially a policy construct, a number chosen for administrative and economic reasons in the 20th century, not because 65 is when humans stop wanting to live on their own terms. The story was told often enough that it became a belief. The belief became a plan. And the plan became your life, by default. The third trap is what economists at the University of Chicago call the hedonic treadmill. No matter what you buy, what you earn, what you upgrade, the feeling of enough resets. You get the car and within 6 months it's just the car. You get the apartment and within a year it's just home. The satisfaction fades, but the expense remains. And so you are always running toward a feeling that keeps moving. The treadmill has no finish line. The people who figured out early retirement figured out how to step off the treadmill, not by wanting less, but by wanting differently. You were not bad with money. You were playing a game designed to keep you playing. But here's what nobody tells you about money. The people who retire early are not, statistically, the highest earners. Research published by wealth economist Thomas Stanley, whose work at institutions including Georgia State University tracked millionaire behavior over decades, found that the majority of people who achieve financial independence did so on ordinary or moderate incomes. Not extraordinary ones. The variable that separated them from everyone else was not income. It was the gap. The consistent, protected, non-negotiable gap between what they earned and what they allowed themselves to spend. That's it. That is the secret that expensive seminars build 6-hour presentations around. The gap. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because knowing about the gap doesn't create it. And this is where most financial advice abandons you, right at the moment you actually need it. They tell you the what. They leave out the why. And they completely ignore the who. Because the gap is not a math problem. If it were, knowing about it would be enough. The gap is an identity problem. And this is where everything you thought you knew about retiring early breaks open. The research here is striking. Psychologists at Stanford University, studying long-term financial behavior, found that people do not make financial decisions based primarily on logic or information. They make them based on identity, on who they believe themselves to be. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with money, every piece of financial advice filters through that identity and gets rejected. Not because you're stubborn. Because the brain protects its self-image with tremendous force. The limbic system again. When new information threatens your sense of self, your brain treats it like a physical threat. Your cortisol, the stress hormone, rises. Your decision-making narrows. You protect the story even when the story is hurting you. This is why willpower fails. This is why budgets fail. This is why January gym memberships and savings challenges and, this time it's different, conversations with yourself fail. Not because you lack discipline. Because discipline is a tactic, and you are fighting a war of identity. The people who retire early didn't just change their spending. They changed who they were in relation to money. Let me show you what that actually looks like, because this is the part most people miss. There's a concept studied extensively by researchers at MIT Sage Lab, the idea of the financial identity gap. The distance between who you are financially and who you believe you're capable of becoming. What they found is that the size of that gap predicts financial behavior more accurately than income, education, or even financial literacy. People with a small identity gap, people who genuinely believe they are the kind of person who builds wealth, make dramatically different small decisions. Not dramatic decisions. Small ones. Daily ones. The kind of decisions that don't feel like they matter until you add them up over 5 years. Here's a story. Not a hypothetical. A pattern documented in the research of financial planner and author William Bernstein, who has studied the wealth-building behavior of ordinary Americans for decades. There is a type of person who earns between $60,000 and $80,000 a year, lives in a mid-sized city, drives a used car that is paid off, lives in a home below what the bank told them they could afford, and invests the difference with the consistency of someone paying a utility bill. Not excitedly. Not obsessively. Just consistently. This person does not feel deprived. They made a decision early, or sometimes in their 30s after a wake-up moment, that their future self was more important than their present image. And because they made that decision from identity rather than willpower, they didn't have to fight themselves every month. The decision was already made. They were already that person. At 47, they retired. Not to sit on a beach. To choose. To wake up on a Tuesday and decide what that Tuesday would be about. That is what early retirement actually is. It is not laziness. It is sovereignty. And what happens next is the part most people miss, because it applies directly to you. The math of early retirement is not complicated. In fact, the most widely referenced framework for it, developed and validated by researchers including Professors William Benjen and later scholars at Trinity University in Texas, is built on a single principle called the safe withdrawal rate. The finding, if you save and invest until your portfolio reaches 25 times your annual expenses, you can withdraw 4% annually and, historically, your money will last 30 years or more. 25 times your annual expenses. Not your annual income. Your annual expenses. This is where the identity shift lives. Because if your annual expenses are $40,000, you need $1 million to retire. If your annual expenses are $60,000, you need $1.5 million. The number is not fixed. You have direct control over the denominator. And most financial conversations never tell you this because the financial industry profits from complexity, from confusion, from making you feel like you need their products to navigate something that is, at its core, elegantly simple. Your retirement date is a math problem. And you control most of the variables. Now let's go deeper. Because there are 3 principles underneath all of this that determine whether you actually close the gap, or just feel inspired for a week and return to the same pattern. And I want to be honest with you, these principles will be uncomfortable. Because they're not about numbers. They're about you. The first principle, every dollar you spend is a vote for your present self over your future self. This is not metaphor. Neuroscientists at UCLA, studying intertemporal decision-making, which is the technical term for choosing between now and later, found that people who struggle with long-term financial planning tend to have weaker neural connectivity between the brain regions that process present identity and future identity. In simple terms, your future self feels like a stranger. And humans are not naturally generous with strangers. When you spend money impulsively, you are not being weak. You are being human. Your brain genuinely has trouble connecting the present you to the 72-year-old you, or even the 55-year-old you. That disconnection is the enemy of wealth building. And the solution is not to fight your brain. It's to make your future self feel real. Vivid, specific. People who write in detail about what their retired life looks like, where they live, what they do in the mornings, how they feel, show measurably better saving behavior than those who think about retirement abstractly. Your future self needs to be a person you actually know, not a number on a page. The second principle, the real cost of any purchase is not what you pay. It's the future value you surrender. This is basic compound interest, but nobody teaches it with the emotional weight it deserves. $100 spent today at age 30 is not $100. At a historical stock market return of roughly 7 to 8% annually, a conservative estimate based on long-run averages cited by Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Shiller at Yale University, that $100 becomes approximately $800 by the time you're 65. Every purchase you make is a negotiation with your future self. You are not spending money. You are trading future time for present consumption. Sometimes that trade is worth it. Often, for the forgettable purchases, the automatic upgrades, the things you bought and stopped noticing within a month, it is not. The people who retire early developed an instinct for this trade. Not an obsession. An instinct. A quiet internal question, is this worth the future it costs? There is something darker underneath this, and I'm not going to let you look away from it. The third principle, your lifestyle was designed by someone else. This is not conspiracy. This is marketing science, studied extensively at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. The consumption patterns of the average American household are not primarily the result of personal choice. They are the result of decades of deliberate social engineering, advertising, social comparison, status signaling, that has calibrated your desires to a standard of living that requires perpetual employment. The car you feel you need. The neighborhood you feel you must live in. The vacations that signal success to people whose approval you're not even sure you want. These are not your desires. They were given to you. And you pay for them, every month, with the years of your life. The people who break out of this, and research from the Journal of Consumer Research consistently shows they exist across every income bracket, are not the people with the most willpower. They are the people who stopped outsourcing their values to the market. They decided, specifically and deliberately, what they actually wanted. And they found that what they actually wanted was almost always cheaper than what they had been convinced to want. This is where it gets interesting. Because when you strip away the manufactured desires, the comparison spending, the lifestyle inflation that arrived quietly with each raise, what most people find is this: what they actually want is time. Autonomy. The ability to say no to things that drain them and yes to things that don't. And those things, genuinely, do not cost what we've been told they cost. Now I'm going to say some things that might land hard. I'm going to say them not to judge you, but because the math has no feelings, and it doesn't care if the truth is uncomfortable. Here's the first one. If you are earning a decent income and have almost nothing saved, your lifestyle is someone else's marketing budget working on you in real time. That's not shame. That's a diagnosis. And diagnoses are useful. Here's the second one. You are likely one significant emergency, a medical event, a job loss, a family crisis, away from a financial situation you are not prepared for. Not because you are irresponsible. Because the system has made it phenomenally easy to look financially stable while being financially fragile. A report from the Federal Reserve Survey on the economic well-being of U.S. households found that a significant portion of Americans, across income levels, would struggle to cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing. $400. Think about what that means in terms of what you'd face with a $4,000 emergency. Or $40,000. This is not meant to frighten you. It's meant to make the risk visible, because invisible risk is the most dangerous kind. And here's the third one. Every person you've looked at and thought, they have it figured out, the early retirees, the financially free, the people who seem to live on their own terms, almost every one of them made a choice you haven't made yet. Not a genius choice. Not a lucky choice. A specific, quiet, unsexy choice to stop spending to match an image and start saving to build a life. That choice is available to you. It has always been available to you. The question is whether you're ready to make it. 5 years from now, you'll wish you'd started today. And I know that sounds like the end of every motivational finance video you've ever watched. But strip the inspiration away and what's left is just arithmetic. Every month you delay is a month of compound growth you don't get back. Every year you wait is a year of your finite, irreplaceable life spent working because you had to instead of because you chose to. Time is not abstract here. Time is the actual currency. And it is the one currency that never comes back. So here is where we land. Not with an answer. With a choice. You can leave this video and return to the pattern. It is a reasonable choice. It is the path of least resistance, and it has a certain comfort to it, the comfort of familiarity, the comfort of not having to become someone different. In 10 years you will be in roughly the same financial position, adjusted for inflation, adjusted for whatever life throws at you, working toward a retirement that is always 10 years away. That is a life. It is not a bad life. But it is not freedom. Or you can sit with what this video actually said. Not the tactics, the principles. The identity piece. The gap. The question of who you actually are in relation to your money, and who you are willing to become. You can have the uncomfortable conversation with yourself, not with a spreadsheet, not with a financial advisor, but with yourself, about what you actually want your life to look like. And then you can start making the small, consistent, identity-level decisions that build toward that life. Not dramatically. Quietly. 1 month at a time. But here's what I know about change. It doesn't happen from information alone. It happens from a moment. A specific, personal, private moment when you decide the story you've been living is no longer the story you're willing to tell. Some people have that moment watching a video like this. Some people have it after a health scare, or a birthday that hits differently, or a conversation with someone who got out. I don't know when your moment is. But I know this, you just spent 15 minutes on a video about retiring early. That's not nothing. The version of you that doesn't care about this clicked away in the first 30 seconds. You're still here. So what do you actually want? Not what your job expects. Not what your neighborhood requires. Not what your peer group signals. What do you want? Because the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not primarily a financial gap. It's a decision gap. And decisions don't wait for perfect conditions. They wait for the moment you stop waiting. Nobody's coming to fix this for you. Your move.